just had the supposed two options for government that we have in this country, detain and deport or detain and offshore and deport. We don't have anybody taking seriously the reality of the matter. This has failed. It's been a horrific moral failure and a total pragmatic failure. We have seen that after decades of a deterrence approach, we have more people risking their lives. We have children drowning. We have boats coming in, day out, and both of your parties completely sacrificing any good political will you ever had because of your total failure to grasp the reality that you're not going to make them disappear. What you have to do, what you just simply have to consider, is to offer them a safe alternative. We just
so you're talking about safe and legal routes, like the Ukraine scheme,
like to the UK,
Hong Kong,
like the Ukraine.
Okay, Mike Tapp, how do you respond to Zoe Gardner, and then I'll bring in Katie Lamb.
Well, if you look what we're reportedly talking about the French, obviously this hasn't been confirmed by the Home Office, it is going down that route. And look, I'm not bogged down and stuck in ideology. For me, it's about solutions. And look, if that involves offshore processing, detention on arrival, safe routes, it can be sorting out the ECHR and where that is at the moment.
No one in your party is talking about safe routes, are they?
Of course, it's being discussed in general. And look, the one in, one out idea with the French that has been talked about is precisely that. And of course, there are safe routes.
One in, one out, by definition, if you think about it for just a moment, doesn't work, does it? Because imagine it works brilliantly. And everybody, instead of going to the channel boats, they go to that safe route. Well, then there's no one crossing the channel boats. And therefore, there's no more space on the safe route. And then what happens? Well, the safe route becomes unviable, and they go back to the irregular routes. Come on, you have to see more serious.
If you don't mind, you're advocating for safe routes and then telling me they don't work. And look, we've got them. We've already got them. We've got them in place with Ukraine and some of the nations that really need it.
Why can't we do something like that for Afghanistan? Your government cancelled the safe route for Afghans last week.
Going after the smuggling gangs and ensuring that there's deterrence there. And look, you said that both our parties believe in the same thing, but it hasn't been done yet. The Conservatives failed on it because Rwanda was a gimmick that wouldn't work. But if we can put through some of these serious, sensible policies to deter, then we save lives in the channel.
Okay, let me bring in Katie Lamb. How would you respond to Zoe Gardner?
500,000 people have come here on safe and legal routes since 2015.
Mm-hmm.
We are, and have been for a very long time, a generous country. There is no way that we could ever have a volume of safe and legal routes that on its own would stop this from happening. Demand would dramatically outstrip supply. Those humanitarian visas are a tiny percentage of the legal migration that we saw under the last government. But 500,000 people is a really significant number of people. The number of people who want to come here, and in fact the number of people who would be qualified to claim asylum here if they were to arrive, is massive. We're talking hundreds of millions of people around the world.
That's ridiculous.
There is no way.
Numbers like that is irresponsible.
There is no way
when we gave
that they could all come here and that we could look after them. It's
out of 38 million Ukrainians, 200,000 people came, and they were offered, unlike asylum seekers now, the right to work. They were offered housing in our communities. They were offered immediate access to the welfare state, and we managed it just fine. This is ridiculous to say that everybody on earth is coming here.
Zoe Gardner, do you accept that from the voters' point of view, illegal migration is a problem?
Yes,
they don't
like it. They think it's absolutely
unfair.
Fundamentally necessary to people's survival illegal. Well, what happens? Of course, this is unacceptable. The people drowning, the people in the conditions that your report that showed us, people like Julia who are being told that in order to get out of that squalid camp, she has to sleep with a smuggler. All of our policies could have been designed by somebody who wanted to exploit migrants, who wanted to keep them in situations of modern slavery, keeps them in forced sex work, keep them in underpaid work where you can abuse them as you see fit, because our system criminalizes people who are here anyway.
Is that fair?
Look, what I see from certain ideological viewpoints is banging on about safe routes, which I do think is a part of the solution. But of course, Katie was right in that the demand would absolutely go through the roof. So there's a number of different things we have to do. Look, the fact that it's so bad now points towards that. The fact is we need to look at lots of different policy types and stop being bogged down in ideology. How do we stop this from happening? maybe safe routes. Yes, offshore processing, detention on arrival.
How would it stop anyone from coming if you do offshore processing? All that means actually is taking our asylum system and putting it in another country. So that means all the lawyers, all the caseworkers, all of the asylum seekers obviously have to go through that process that currently your government is taking an average of 1 to 3 years to get a person
one of the
through.
issues,
And you want to put that all in another country? It's
respond.
not realistic.
Let him respond.
One of the issues with being bogged down in an ideology is, and I've had this debate with a number of people, is that they think that you can argue through litigation to not deport a foreign paedophile who's come over and raped children. That's utterly disgraceful, because this is the problem. We've been so bogged down in a left-wing ideology.
We're talking about people coming across.
I know, but this deportation side of things is really important. And if we can't remove people who shouldn't be here, we've got a big issue. And when I speak to people who are, too far on the left or too far on the right, they just don't understand what we need to do to come up with the solutions for this. Okay. And that's where we need to come at this from.
Final word, Katie Lamb, on this.
People are working so hard. They are doing everything that they can and barely keeping their heads above water. We simply cannot afford to keep everybody who crosses the channel in a hotel, all of their healthcare, dentists. We simply can't afford it.
Right to work?
Right to work.
Incentivizes even more people to cross. It makes the problem dramatically worse.
That doesn't make any sense. In Spain, they give them the right to work, and the Spanish economy is overtaking the rest of Europe and the States, and that is based on how welcoming they are being towards migrants. Both countries also have very serious migration and illegal migration problems. They do. And they are welcoming people with the right to work.
I'm going to pause there.